Okay, so we're a little bit behind schedule, but we'll work on that. First, I want to acknowledge that I'm joining everyone here from the Saanich territory, and I just want to acknowledge my gratitude for the people who were here before me and my ancestors, taking care of and looking after the land and its inhabitants. Hechkasiem. Okay, so opening round. This is the check-in, and I'm just, to get into the practice, just to help everyone remember, I'm actually, for now, adding some of the information from the S3 on what this can be for. And what comes up for me right now, just in terms of the opening round, is this is an opportunity. It's to not be thinking about the work that we're here to do, but to be, be aware of our humanity and who we are as whole beings that we bring to the team. And usually this is just a great opportunity to clear if there's something on our mind that's going to prevent us from being present. Now's the chance. There's no obligation. You can pass. And particularly to accommodate people who may not be maybe new to the group, there's always an opportunity just to introduce yourself and say where you're from. Okay, anyone want to go?
I will say that, as I mentioned earlier, I was up to 4 in the morning taking care of Mr. Hazen's requirements, which I succeeded at. But thank you very much. At least I think I did. Andrew, you'll tell me.
Blame and guilt. Blame and guilt.
That's how my mother worked.
I'm going to bring a little bit of discipline here. And I know this is really lighthearted. This discussion is not what we want here. So this is just one person has the floor, and
sorry.
That's okay. It's just this. Go ahead, John.
Interesting. No, okay, that's fascinating. So it was successful, but I am simultaneously really quite tired and catching up with some tasks this morning. So I'm probably going to be only fully sort of dialed in the next 5 minutes, 5 to 7 minutes, and I apologize for that.
Okay. I'm really grateful again for the opportunity and the trust of the team for me to be facilitating. I know this is a growth area for me, and I'm sensing sort of butterflies. I trust the group, but it's still like exciting. And it feels like a pretty safe environment to be doing this. So that's just what I'm present to.
Great. So I want to apologize to the group for being a bit late this morning. I normally am not, but my partner offered to make the leftover waffles from yesterday, and I couldn't say no. But I'm now really excited to be here and very inspired by the learning that Michael has been showing us these past couple of months. And I hope to try and do some catch up.
Anyone else before we move on? Great, thanks everyone. So we're on to administrative matters, and we've got, how much time did I give for this? 8 to 18, 10 minutes. And it's, so first, consent to last meeting's minutes. Is there anyone here who doesn't feel familiar enough with the last meeting's minutes to either consent or not consent? Okay. Okay, so I'm checking for objections. Okay, very good.
Sorry, Michael, I just wanted, since we've got Fiona here, could we just maybe give quick highlights, key decisions made, so that she's got the context for what we're doing and why?
Well, let me just flip over there. I've got the minutes open.
Okay.
So these are minutes from our previous governance meeting. So the way that we're rolling now is that the team is meeting more frequently on tactical matters, just operationally, but we hold governance meetings less frequently to work on the agreements that guide our work that we do. So we had our first governance meeting. I believe that's what these meetings were from. And we did have some action items, some homework. A major one was about defining the domain of the mission circle that is meeting here. And we realized that that was crucial information, so that before we could start to decide, well, what kind of roles do we want to create for this team? So that was, I think, the general outcome of that meeting.
Thank you.
Yeah, no problem. Any last minute agenda items? This is the chance to add them. Now, I'd just like to say, I think an ideal to shoot for is that we are not adding agenda items at this point in time, but it is an opportunity so that we've done the work ahead of time. And a great way to think about them is if they are, if we understand what the driver is or what the tension is, or if we actually have a proposal ready to add.
I thought based on federal council, this is when you prepare things in advance and then hijack the meeting by surprising people with aggressive items. Is that not the way?
That is not the way.
That's
Yes.
not the way. Okay, sorry.
Reminding us of the bad behaviors
Yes.
when it started so well.
Sorry. Sorry. I'm the negative one, Fiona, as you know.
Yeah. And we're recording, by the way.
Right.
But
Whoops. Sorry, federal council, but it's true. Okay.
We've seen instances where that happens, for sure. Confirm date for next governance meeting. Anyone have an idea on this? I'm still thinking for right now, 2 weeks at a time is appropriate. Anyone? Okay, I've seen a thumbs up. Everyone good with that? Sounds like it. I should say, is there any objections? No, okay. Now, consent to this agenda as is. Does anyone not familiar with it?
Can I just ask where you filed the agenda? Because I'm looking in meetings and I'm looking in governance, and I'm just wondering where I might find it on Google.
So I've gone straight to Decidim in this case. I remember last time that I had a bit of a fit because I made this big, long, beautiful agenda, and then I hadn't configured something correctly. And I didn't know why, and when I saved it, it disappeared. And so that's when I decided that what a waste. I want to use Google Docs. But Andrew convinced me that it would just be not what you said, but just that I was inspired to try again, and it was a much more efficient process. So there is no Google Doc version of this agenda.
Do you mind putting the link in the chat so I can reference it in the minutes?
Yep, okay.
Sorry to keep interrupting you.
No, that's okay. I did share this link in the calendar invitation. So could someone else please do that for Anne so that I can keep going?
Yep.
Thank you. So I'm looking for objections to the agenda. No, okay, great. So we can keep going then. Now we're on to the agenda items. So this is first short reports. They're optional and as deemed necessary. And I'm open to sort of navigating by attention with the group and inviting others to find out how best to use this time. I've only given, I believe, how much time is that? 18 to 33, is that 15 minutes?
Yeah.
Reports. They're not necessary, but I'm just suggesting an opportunity for individuals who have anything they feel is important to update the team, particularly in terms of what does the team need to do to stay in sync, raise any tensions that you are becoming aware of. But that's basically 3 minutes per item. So we'll check the backlog. Anyway, that's all the time that we have. We're a little bit over. We started late, so we're not doing too badly. We're on to agreements due review. So this is still within, so agenda items, it's the next agenda item. And I put a link to the Mission Circle backlog. So there are I'm just gonna go there particularly just so everyone can be familiar with this. And Fiona, for your benefit, what we've learned in the Sociocracy practice is that we keep what's called a backlog. So as things come up that as drivers come up, or even tensions that we sense need to be addressed, as they come up, we get them into the backlog, and that way we can collaboratively prioritize what are the things that we need to address. And so we actually break it up into operations and governance. So governance, as I said before, which we deal with in this meeting, is the agreements that we need to set so that we can have some boundaries around the work that we do to help keep it all happening more effectively. As I mentioned before, we have no agreements yet due review. We're quite new to this, so we don't have a lot of agreements. But on that note, a note that I made in the agenda, do we need to review any agreements and add review dates? So I don't have anything that comes up for me, but I just want to maybe just plant that seed for everyone to be thinking about. What have we said that we were going to be doing? Small example, at the beginning of the meeting, I said that we talked about time integrity. And I'm even in that moment, I thought, did I do everything that I could? This is the pattern, artful participation. Did I do everything that I could to enable more collaboration, to support my peers in remembering, oh, I should show up on time, not just show up right at or a few minutes later.
Yep.
Okay, so now we're on to consent decision-making process for the domain description for Mission Circle. And this was the major piece of homework that came out of our last governance meeting. And Anne and I were tasked. So here's what I do following the pattern that has been presented in S3, is that on an agenda, when we get to this item, you specify what is the driver, who are the people who are leading it. So I put the tuners, Anne and myself. What process is going to be used, which is consent decision making. How much time are we going to allot this process? 20 minutes. I think that's generous for this, but we can always use less, and that's fine. I'd rather not run out of time that we didn't think we'd need. I put a link to the document, which has the tuned proposal. And I also put a link to the pattern for consent decision making for everyone's benefit. John, your hand's up. Go ahead. Question? You're muted.
Sorry, by raising my hand, it doesn't need to be urgent, but the quick question, I just realized that I crashed that process, and I just want to check if that's...
No, that's fine. Thank you for checking.
Yes, as a rule, that's fine.
So what you meant by that is that you came into the document and you made some suggestions.
Mm-hmm.
Now, one of the patterns in Sociocracy is adapt patterns to context. So it's never gospel. We can, there's flexibility. We just need to, is it allowing us to be effective? Is it hindering our ability to be effective? And that's one way we can navigate by attention to see is it good or not. I found it very helpful. What I can acknowledge about this is that because I was, as someone who, I'll say, because there's a lack of clarity on the role for someone who's actually making sure that we are actually scheduling our governance meetings and having them on time, even though I sort of felt like I know that I nominally have that role right now, I only put the agenda together yesterday, which means I didn't give a lot of notice to Anne to make sure that we were up to date on our tuning. So that was a little bit rushed. So this is all a little imperfect and we have opportunity to improve, but thanks for checking in on that. But on that note, I think we just go with what we have and use the consent decision-making process to see if we can get to a decision that's good enough for now and safe enough to try. So we start by presenting the driver. So it's really straightforward. I hope this isn't contentious, but defining the mission circle's domain is key to focus and coordinate work. Plus, it's good practice for S3. I don't think that's contentious. I don't think we need to debate it. So I'm looking for consent to the driver. The reason why we even decided to do this this delegation in the first place.
I'm using the thumbs up.
Excellent.
Reaction.
Okay, so on 3, I need the hand signals. So 1, 2, 3. Sweet. Okay, very good. So the driver's been presented, it's consented. Now we can present the proposal. Now the proposal is the entire delegation canvas for the mission circle. So hopefully, ideally, everyone has become familiar with this ahead of time. And so I just need to check, is there anyone in this meeting who feels they're not familiar enough with this and needs us to go through it quickly just before they can actually legitimately weigh in on whether they consent to it or not.
Don't be shy, Fiona.
I don't want to hold up. I mean, I'm very, very conscious of the time, and I don't want to hold you up.
Okay. Well then, but what we should, I think, then do is move right to clarifying questions.
It won't get wet.
So a round of clarifying questions. Does anyone need to have a question about this document as written before to understand it better? Nope. Okay, so that's that round done. Brief response. So a round. I want to hear just everyone's. So let's start with Anne.
Okay, I found
Brief.
Yeah, I found it very useful to work collaboratively with Michael and sort of put our two documents together. I remember reviewing it late last week and I saw that everything seemed to be okay, but I apologize that I didn't review it last night. I just assumed nothing would change between last Friday and last night.
Thank you. John?
It's really great. I'm learning a lot by using the sociocratic model. My concern is, as I put in the comments, is whether specifying a mission and the tension between how operational versus strategic our role should be.
Of course, that's understandable. What comes up for me, in general, the educational experience of going through this has been really helpful, and I feel like just through this process, even though it's been super drawn out, I think, for just defining a domain, I think it's exactly where we need it to be. What I do want to share, because I think it's been a real breakthrough for me, is in my practice with S3, there was an article which I found on the S3 community site, which was specifically on this subject. And I've actually taken some language from that. And I think it's so valuable for now that I've added it to the template for the delegation canvas. Because it asks this question, do I need to use this document? And so a domain is a continuously evolving agreement. And I love this rule of thumb. The simplest, most flexible domain is one that has no written description at all. And this gets us back into thinking, do we need, is the time it takes for the effort that we put into defining this document actually worth the payoff? Do we need these rules? Do we need these guidelines? And if we don't need to articulate domain. And that's part of what we're always sensing into. And so anyway, I just wanted to point out that that's there, because I think I think it will help, and I'd be curious to, as we move forward, to get that feedback, but not right now. John, your hand's up.
I just had a quick comment on that exact thing.
Okay,
if you don't.
Go for it.
To add a detail that made that super powerful for me is that it's talking about a not defined role domain at any level. Mm-hmm. Right. So in other words, you could be a junior team, you could be some team working out on the edge, and if you say, hey, I want to do this and no one else is doing it, no one else is taking responsibility, you can do it. It can be yours, right? You don't have to go up 5 levels and get approval. You don't have to finish your work and then talk to so-and-so. No one's doing it. You just go ahead and do it. And I think that's a big sea change. Do you interpret it the same way?
For sure. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
Because again, going back to the whole idea about consent is do things in the absence of reasons not to, as opposed to wait for everyone to get to yes before you do anything.
Massive change.
Huge change. Just like linguistically, just a little shift, but it changes everything. Hi, Victoria. Welcome.
Totally. Oh my God.
Okay, so we're on to checking for objections. So it's the next round. We will do this, reflect on whether you have or whether you came to the meeting with an objection already. Keeping in mind that we'll also be, if objections come up, there'll also be a round of checking to see whether objections qualify as an objection. So there's 2 things that are relevant here. Is one, can you see a way to make this better right now? Or can you see a way that something about this will cause harm or cause unintended consequences. And if it's not one of those two, it's not a relevant objection. So keeping that in mind, think about what your hand signal is. I don't want to see it yet. A thumbs up means you have no objection. Hand like this, a little wavy like this, means I have a concern, but it's not something that is problematic enough that it counts as an objection. It's not something that should stop this from going ahead. It still means this is good enough for now, safe enough to try, but we can address those later. So if you do have a concern, we can decide whether we'll talk about it afterwards, but it's not enough to be an objection. And then hand up is I have an objection. And the hand up because it's a gift. It's your offering of wisdom to help make a better, evolve a better agreement. So on 3, we'll show our hand signals. Everyone put your fist up when you're ready to show your hand signal. Okay, and then on 3, we'll show our hand signal. 1, 2, 3. Okay, I think I see 3 objections. So we process one objection at a time. So I'm going to start with Victoria. Could you briefly share your objection and your potential objection, and then we'll go from there.
I'm sorry, I got the hand signal mixed up.
Oh, okay.
So I don't actually have an objection.
You don't. Okay, great. So that was a thumbs up. Sweet. Okay, so that
Yeah,
John,
Thumbs up.
Objections?
thumbs up means no objection. I consent. It's good enough for now, safe enough to try.
Thumbs up.
Fantastic. Okay, John, you have an objection. Could you state your objection, your potential objection briefly?
So I was debating whether it's a objection or a concern because it's kind of been taken out of the document, but the question was around metrics and to what extent our circle should be responsible for finding and following metrics related to mission and values. But I couldn't actually see that text anymore. So I don't know if that's...
So it could have gotten removed in the tuning.
Okay.
But okay, so
It's probably worth having the discussion to clarify the way we're thinking about it. But if it's not, I'll leave it anyway.
What I'd like to just for you,
Okay.
if you
Yes.
like, do you see a way to improve this right now, or do you see a way that this as is could cause harm to the work that we're doing?
I think it's actually more of a clarification question that I missed because I didn't look at the change in the document. Okay. So we might be able to resolve the clarification question.
Okay, so for you, okay, let's jump back. What your clarification question is?
The clarification question is whether or not we perceive this document as giving us the responsibility to define and monitor metrics, because that was in there. It's no longer, and I don't know if that's us avoiding the question or saying that we're not.
I think it may be valuable for me to raise my objection here, because it's like I should have said bingo, which is sort of it's not a pattern, but it can be something that we do to say when we hear something that we agree with, it's like, okay, so I don't need to repeat my objection. It's so similar to yours that I'm just going to say bingo, that's mine too.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Because that language is no longer there in metrics, I'm actually going to, mine was on evaluation. And I'm challenged by the specificity of particularly also the long term, like every year we will be participating in doing an assessment, because I don't even know whether Mission Circle is going to be relevant in the same way in a year. So maybe this language just needs to be moved to the general circle, like that way of thinking. But more importantly, under evaluation, what I am offering is actually just to specify that in a month, the domain will do a review of the domain description, and every 3 months after there or as necessary, and that the actual Mission Circle will do a peer review process. I'm saying once every 3 months, where as the co-owners of this domain, co-stewards of this domain, we are responsible for assessing our own performance. And then I know that within the like the knowledge that's held within this team and experience, we won't lose sight of this. And I know that that tension is there. We'll be navigating for how can we do this better. But I'm feeling that having this language is going to be make this good enough for now and safe enough that we can move forward successfully. That was my objection, and I'm checking for consent that I could change. So it means removing the specificity of this line, just basically this. And then I think I'm much more comfortable with it leaves it more flexible.
Can we, rather than removing the language, can we put in what you said? Because I think what you reflected was the idea of working more in a startup model when you have a team of really, a team that's functional.
Okay.
I
If
was gonna say,
does this document need that language? Do we, like, going back to this, what we said before about the rule of thumb is simplest, most flexible domain where nothing's written. Are you saying if that isn't written, you're afraid that we're going to lose it? Like,
well, we weren't reaching the right conclusion without it, right? So you've just defined for the first time a principle by which we're choosing, we're helping to guide our way through selecting processes, right? We hadn't articulated that before. So the fact that you've now articulated that and it's useful guidance for the way that we define the document, I think actually is really helpful.
Well, it's in the minutes, so it can easily be moved in. It's not a big deal.
that it's in the minutes?
Yeah.
So I think that's great. I don't agree. I don't. So John, I object to that suggestion.
Okay.
I think it's too much. I think it's leaning too much, and this document has to be perfect. I think this is good enough for now, so you have to try.
Okay.
Think about the work that we're doing.
I consent.
Okay. Okay. With that change made, I'm satisfied. My objection is removed because I think we've corrected that. So with that, I'm going to check again the document as is with those changes. Checking for a round of consent. Everyone, when you've made up your mind, show your fist so you're ready to signal. On 3, 1, 2, 3. All right.
Woo.
And now we celebrate because we've made our agreement. Good job, everyone.
Jazz hands.
Right. That's okay. Now we have 4 hand signals.
There we go.
Okay. So now would be the time if anyone had any concerns, right? When we were doing the rounds and anyone had their hand like this, now we would check to check the group for consent. Do we have time? Are we interested in listening to those concerns? Which probably are going to add value, but they didn't stop the agreement from happening. But we didn't have any, sort of, but we navigated that. So that agenda item is complete. Awesome.
Amazing. God.
Where are we? Okay, so that's all that I had scheduled in terms of work, like governance processes for the agenda. I did schedule an hour and 15 minutes because I figured we might need to go over a little bit, but we're only 3 minutes past the hour, so I'm feeling pretty good about that. Now, because there's a bit of time, I just want to raise this as an option because I know earlier we said that we weren't going, ideally we don't add things on the fly to the agenda, but this could be an opportunity if we realize that, let's say the tuner, if Anne and I had collectively, and if everything in a perfect world, I think we would have had that document tuned up a little bit more tightly, which would have probably sped up the consent decision-making process. So in the future, I think we'll always be pushing for that. But there is always the governance backlog, and perhaps we do have other things that we could be discussing. So as the person who created the agenda, and that role is going to be, looking at what's on our backlog, what's priority, what can we fit into the agenda, getting consent on that, check, and us work as a team using the backlog to collectively communicate to the team what we think is top priority. then there could be an opportunity to say, hey, let's go to the backlog. Maybe there's something else we could do right now. But I'm going to suggest that we don't do that today. I'm going to ask for consent if we don't do that today, just because of the time. Okay. So we bring this to all our meetings, just as an opportunity to reflect on the actual meeting, so that we can. So this is like governance of governance in a way, just to see if we can continue to improve and be more effective in our meeting practices. So some things to think about would be: do you think there's anything that you want to see more of, or less of, or to start doing, or stop doing, or definitely retain? Or, you know, is there anything that is positive or something that you're critical about or suggest improvements? And if you're at all interested, I put the link here, which is to the actual pattern for meeting evaluation. But it's pretty simple. Just
Wow.
yeah. So this is a round, and this time I'd like to invite Fiona to begin. Any feedback that you'd like to offer? Observations?
Simply that I'm very glad that I was joined this morning, because it's giving me a sense of how this all works. So I just want to thank you for allowing me to sit in on this. I'd also just, oh no, sorry, that's not.
Okay, thank you. John, I'm going around on my, go ahead.
Sure. I was super happy, really impressed. I thought it was efficient, respectful. I felt that I was completely heard, and I was shut up in an appropriate way when that was appropriate. So, and I was looking for ways I could provide more constructive suggestions, Michael, and I'm really having a hard time. The only thing I was aware of was in the beginning, I could feel that there would be a bit of a cultural gap with people being thrown into the language, right? In the sense that, especially at the beginning when we were trying to really be specific about using sociocratic language, it's different than your normal sort of day-to-day accessible language. And I was just conscious of that gap and wondering how it would come across to people who were just thrown into that. Right. Later, I was much less aware of that. And I don't know whether that was me adjusting or our language adjusting. But certainly at the beginning, there was a gap there. So I'm going to be looking at that as we go along. What I don't want to see is that we become something that's just becomes so inaccessible because we're using language and concepts and things that are just so different from day to day.
Thank you.
No problem.
Victoria, for the time that you were here, any observations?
I'm really excited about trying to implement the change into a new, more respectful way of having a meeting. So I'm just really grateful that you're all spending so much time doing this. I think that the work will be very fruitful.
Thank you. Anne.
I think the meeting went very well. You chaired it as usual with sensitivity, and yet still stayed on track. And it's good that we got a decision based on consent. I think we should be very proud of ourselves, because there was a lot of work involved in getting there. So thank you very much, Michael, and everyone else for being good meeting people.
What I'm most present to is the preparation and how that affects the actual meeting. And so that's something that I'm going to be feeling into moving forward. As I acknowledged earlier on, that getting into a bit of a rhythm, having enough foresight to be planning ahead, that everyone just is more aligned and ready. I look forward to future consent decision-making processes where the more kinks are worked out ahead of time. But having said that, and this is something that I've been aware of, particularly with conversations that I've had recently with other practitioners who are way further along than I am, one thing that stuck out with me is someone saying that it's almost inevitable in their experience, once people in an organization experience the potential which is unlocked because of this shift in thinking, there's no turning back, and it's revolutionary for people. And I'm starting to see, and like, the difference that it's not just like when we say consent seeking versus consensus seeking, where we recognize that objections are the gift. This is a process that allows us to tap into the collective wisdom to make sure that we are making the most effective evolved agreement possible. There's no, the idea that you would, vote on a contested idea, it seemed, I really see now, it feels like it's such a waste of an opportunity to do something better. So I love that it just doesn't, that part is kind of getting squeezed out. So we'll keep doing more of that, I think. But that's my observation. On the right track. And that concludes today's governance meeting. Celebrate, yay.
Woo, yay.
Okay, I'm gonna stop recording.